Joining me today are two people who help agency owners sleep a little easier. Ryan Lisk is the founder of Hybrid Legal, and Kay Young is a senior solicitor on the Hybrid team. Between them, they help fast-moving businesses avoid legal headaches and fix the ones that already hurt, and especially when it comes to contracts, tech law, data privacy, and AI. Ryan spent the last 11 years combining legal thinking with entrepreneurial insight, and Kay's known for cutting through the legal noise and giving practical advice that makes commercial sense, especially to clients in the tech space. So welcome to you both, and welcome back, Ryan, because you've joined me. This is the second time.
Yeah, no, well, thank you very much for having us, Jenny, and then obviously it's lovely to be back, but this time joined by Kay, so I'm feeling even more confident now.
Yeah, absolutely. Kay, welcome.
Hi Jenny, nice to be on here.
It's brilliant. And Kay, actually, before we start with the questions, Kay has been helping me with all my contracts and AI policies. So, and the level of detail is just so informative for me. So thank you for everything you've done so far. So I'm going to get straight into the tricky questions, because AI has become a bit of a divisive topic, I think, in the agency industry. So lots to cover. Let's start with what you both think, and either one of you can start. What are the biggest legal blind spots that you're seeing when it comes to agencies jumping into AI right now?
Kay, did you want to take it?
Sure. Um, I think one of the things is, I think, agencies have been with there's two types. There's the ones who have been really embracing AI and really proactive, want to get their hands on every single tool and just roll it out there. And then you've got those who are really cautious and sort of just tick the box saying, I'm not using AI. Well, for the ones who are really, really pro AI and enthusiastic, the obvious blind spot is they're not necessarily reading the T's and C's that come with the AI, and they're not necessarily using it in a fully transparent way. They're not aware of certain things, certain rights that they might have given to the AI. And then on the other extreme, you've got, agencies who are being a bit more reserved, a little bit more risk adverse, who say they're not using AI. Actually, they might be without realizing it. And I think that's one of the blind spots, is, they may be, even something like a note taker. Some people don't regard that as an AI tool, but it is. If you're using a note taker, there's certain things you need to be aware of, regarding data protection, that agencies don't always go into with their eyes open on. And also, if you are working in a supply chain and somebody's used AI to create an output that then you use, well, guess what? You're actually technically using AI.
Let's go into that note taker, because I think that's pretty universal. I think we're all seeing them pop up on meetings that we attend, and or we use them ourselves. So with that specific topic, and I think we just want to keep rolling with this conversation, because topics like this are going to come up. This is pretty. Tell us about what agency owners and account managers might be inadvertently doing that they didn't intend to do, with note takers specifically.
Okay. This is Ryan. You look like you're about to jump in with something there.
Yeah, so I'll answer your question on note takers first, Jenny, and then I'd like to go back to your question about legal blind spots, because I have a view on that as well in terms of what I'm seeing and hearing with a lot of agencies and AI at the moment. So on the note taker side of things, I think the challenge there is there's some good note takers and there's some bad note takers. And in order to distinguish what are the good note takers and why are they good, it's the note takers that are really clear on their end user license agreement, but in particular their data protection policy, and making it nice and easy for you to read about what data they're going to collect and whether they're going to store a copy of your recording somewhere that is either in the UK or outside of the UK. If it goes outside of the UK and indeed the European Union, That's where alarm bells should start ringing when it comes to transferring data outside of obviously the European Union and indeed the UK. Um, Good way to find a bad note taker are the ones where you can't easily find a privacy policy. First of all, you've got to really dig and hunt for it. And when you do find it, you'll see that it's generally quite broad and silent, really, on what they're going to be doing with personal data, and in particular, those call recordings. And this is where it gets interesting, because if you're using a note taker to have a confidential discussion with a client and you've agreed contractually that you're going to keep that conversation confidential, if you're then using a note taker which has got a data privacy policy or lack of one, where they're actually going to take that recording and transfer it overseas to an area where it might be more vulnerable to a cyber attack, for example, and other kind of scenarios, that's where you're in the chain of that problem. And if you're using something that you've not checked out yourself, and then the agency, or rather the end client that you're working for, experiences a data breach or experiences a breach of confidence because you've had a conversation about a highly sensitive campaign, that's where obviously it's problematic for you, because you're the one that's used this dodgy note taker that's been attacked, that's leaks information about a brand and their campaign and their intel that's highly useful to other competitors and generally the social media world that we live in. So obviously I know that sounds a bit kind of catastrophizing, but it happens, and it certainly can happen, and that's why I think it's worth checking the devil in the detail. And I think, going to your question, your original question, Jenny, about what are we seeing, just to add to Kay's answers, I'm seeing agencies that are not fully disclosing to their clients their use of AI, and I think that's problematic as well. I think morally it's a bit of an issue where you're not being fully transparent with your client on how you're using AI, and that can sometimes bite if you've signed up to your client's T's and C's, which make it an express condition to ask for permission before you use any form of AI. So that's just the additional piece I would add there to your first question.
Gosh, so many questions in my mind. The thing about disclosing to your client that you're using AI, why do you think agencies aren't having that conversation?
Well, Kate, did you have a view?
Ryan, I'll let you carry on with this one.
Fine. Well, thank you. So I think the main reason why they're not is because it's probably around margin protection, price protection, and a fear that if they disclose their use of AI, they will worry that that's just going to trigger the client to request a lower price point or to challenge and scrutinize the price if they're using something that's going to do the work a bit quicker. Why should we pay more for something that's being done more efficiently? I think that might be one of the key drivers, certainly from what I'm hearing, because I think agencies at the moment are struggling to find the right price point where they're deploying AI and there's a time saving, but they're still creating a lot of value for a client. But clients are obviously taking their work in-house, and as a result, the agency is now fighting to justify its worth. So I think if they're voluntarily saying to a client that they're using AI, I think they worry about that pricing piece. But I also think they worry that the client will say no. And they're obviously very keen to fulfill that project. It's a tough climate at the moment, so winning new business has got a lot harder this year, I think, than previous years. So I think being very transparent about AI use, there's that fear factor that the end client is going to say, well, no, we're not up for that because of all of these issues with data, IP, confidentiality. You know, we don't want you to touch it, but we still want you to charge less for more work, which seems to be the conundrum at the moment.
Ryan, you're an entrepreneur. You You understand that, probably that fear, that worry that agency owners have. It might be opening up a can of worms, and the client will have that different perspective on what we should be charging. What would be, from your kind of business owner hat on, what would be your advice for them? You've got the legal aspect. You know what it's like to be a business owner yourself.
Do you know, Jenny? It's a really difficult one because I sit on both sides of the equation. I sit on it from the side of, we're buyers of creative services. So we will buy from an agency creative output. And obviously, we won't really want that creative output to be AI generated for all of the reasons we're talking about on today's podcast. But on the other side, I'm trading in a world that, it's hard to get things moving in the pipeline and converting, and price now is at the forefront of a lot of businesses' minds. And here we have this gift of AI that can make things a lot quicker to fulfill work in various projects. And I think my view, really, if I was talking to an agency owner about how can you defend your price in a world of AI, I think there are two avenues that you can go down. I think the first avenue is, if you are going to use AI, be transparent about it with your client. And I think you'd be mad not to look at a more competitive price, a lower price point for AI driven projects. So I think, you can't hide behind that for much longer. The fact is, generative AI is here to stay. It's bloody impressive, and it's quick. So I think trying to still charge your same level of margin on an AI-based output, or for a majority of it, that's dead in the water. I think you're going to have to adjust your pricing and go for the volume piece, or be razor sharp with the markets you're going after. Or the other avenue, where if you are keen to defend your margin and your price, would be to take a stance of, no, we're not going to use AI for any of your creative output, because we know that to give you a guarantee that you will own the intellectual property rights and the creative output once we've done your campaign, we know that actually it's going to be our design team using our software, using their own creativity. They're employees of ours, so the agency will own the IP that our creatives will create for you and your campaign. And once you've paid your invoice in full, our contract makes it very clear that we will assign over the IP rights to you. That is a nice, neat trowel of IP ownership, which I think a lot of brands are still looking for. A lot of legal teams, that will be music to a legal team's ears when talking to an agency. If that agency is saying, look, there's a price here to give you a guarantee that you're going to own the IP, because we know we're not using any generative AI, where it's a bit of a mess at the moment and lots of inconsistencies with whether that output from generative AI is truly unique. So we're saying we're not going to use generative AI, but what we are going to do is going to be obviously a higher price point, but you have the peace of mind that you have the IP once you've paid your bill. And I think that's how I would do it. Either go lower price point using AI, mark out the risks, nice and transparent. You're choosing on price rather than IP ownership and all of these other lovely things, and the price reflects that. Or if you do want all of these lovely things and the guarantees and the peace of mind, price needs to follow that, and we work slightly differently, where AI is used just for ideation, for example. So that would be my take on it. But Kay, I don't know whether there's anything you would add to that.
Yeah, on your point about IP and also about the risks associated with it in outputs, going back to Jenny's question about why some agencies are reluctant to say that they're using AI, or even to try using AI for the services that they provide. Some of the clients I've spoken to, it is actually that slight fear that is driving that reluctance. I've had a few who have said to me, I will not use AI to provide any output in my services to my clients because I don't trust it. And if I don't trust it, my clients can't trust it. And there's always the risk as well that I put something out there that's had AI touch it, and even with someone on my team giving it some human verification, there is a margin of error there, and then that creates a risk on my business. I'm a small business, and I could be exposed to a large legal case if something goes wrong, and my clients lose. It's not just money; it's reputation. We've seen it. Deloitte is not a small company, but that's the one which comes into my mind at the moment because that made headline news last week. They had to refund the first part of their very large contract because their AI they used for government paper had hallucinations in it.
Tell us a bit more about that, Kay, and also from both of your perspectives, tell us about any other cases you do know of that are more kind of maybe smaller scale, where we can kind of also learn what not to do. So start with Deloitte, just give us a bit more context to that, and then let's talk about other cases, because when you were speaking just now, Ryan, well, in fact, both of you, it sounds to me like you've experienced perhaps these kinds of situations, which I think are really useful for us to learn from.
Yeah, no problem at all. So, Kate, do you want to cover Deloitte and I'll cover a case?
Yeah, I'll cover Deloitte. But on what you've just said, Kenny, about our experience, I mean, thankfully, we've not experienced any of our clients needing to ending up in court over anything like this. So from a case perspective, it's more, from my point of view, me doing my job as a lawyer and following what's going on, what the case law trends are. So the one with Deloitte is that, again, it's very fresh. The Australian Department of Employment and Workplace, I think. I can't remember the exact name, but a government department in Australia commissioned Deloitte to run a report for them. And it was quite an expensive report. It came to, I think, just under 500,000 Australian dollars. And Deloitte, being with its reputation, it was obviously being charged at because it's got these very experienced staff members there. Those experienced staff members used AI to help write a 200-300 page report, which then they gave to the Australian government department. It was only then that somebody reading the report noticed that there were some references in there that didn't make sense. There were some citations in there. There were quotes that didn't. Someone knowing read the report and went, "No, I know that that's not a real quote." And then when they did a deeper investigation into it, they found out that actually they were made up citations from AI. And ultimately, I don't think it actually went to court, but it resulted in Deloitte having to pay back that close to $500,000. And in terms of the other cases, the type of cases that I've been hearing about are actually affecting lawyers. We're hearing the stories about there's been a few in the US where lawyers have used AI, and AI's made up fake cases that they've then referred to in court, which isn't a great thing. And there's been the first one of those to appear in the UK very recently. It was Allende and Haringey Council. So I think it was a junior lawyer there. Not that the seniority of that person should have any basis, but a lawyer had used AI to help with its case, with the case, and there was again fake case law cited, and they got caught out on it. So yeah, we are hearing more of these cases appearing, and these are from professionals as well who they have a skill set to be able to do these things without having to rely heavily on AI. But then it does make you wonder, what was the reason for using AI? And to Brian's point, we're in a climate now where speed is of the essence. So if AI can help me produce something a lot faster than me going to a law library and combing through all these cases, why not use it? But then, of course, it comes with a risk.
It kind of flags a few things, which this podcast is probably not long enough to cover, but this whole kind of trust thing, when you employ the likes of Deloitte, you do not expect to have to pick up on errors. The inaccuracies of AI, we're still in that mode where they're making shit up. And then the time it takes to check the outputs. And this is something that I'm part of a couple of academies, AI academies. And this bit about, it does a great job within seconds, but then you've still got to rake through it to check that it's accurate. And that takes time. So is it making us lazier? That's the bigger
Yeah.
thing, but obviously it's another topic. But Ryan, you said you had some further cases.
Yeah, so when just to qualify what I mean by cases, these would be examples of real life businesses within the agency space, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to anonymize, I suppose the market niche. So if anyone's listening, that they think, oh my God, he's talking about us, and also to respect confidence. But the point is, the essence of the story will hopefully help your audience when it comes to some practical tips on what not to do with AI, essentially. So the first example is an agency that I was speaking to recently that was doing product photography for a big brand, and they were taking various different pictures of their product line ready for a Christmas campaign. And what they were doing, they organised a photo shoot for the day and took the photographs, and then they told me that they added them into Midjourney to just spruce them up a bit, add different backgrounds into the various images that they'd taken, and then they took the imagery from Midjourney and put it into a social media campaign. And they were asking me, from an AI perspective, do I see any issues with that? And my first question was, tell me about the photographer. They were very focused on Midjourney and a little bit concerned about Midjourney, but I was concerned about a step before that, which was the actual photography itself. And tell me more about who was actually taking the photos and manning the cameras, etc. To which they said a photographer of theirs they've used for many years. And I then said, well, are they on your payroll? The answer was no, they're not on our payroll. We just use them as a contractor ad hoc. I then asked them, okay, is there a contract in place with that photographer which makes it very clear that once you paid them for the photo shoot, they will assign you the IP rights in those photographs? Because I know full well that quite a lot of photographers will retain the rights and will grant a non-exclusive license to images unless you pay a bit more to have the full IP rights in the imagery. And lo and behold, they said, well, no, we don't have a contract in place. My next question was, okay, what have you agreed with the client? Have you got a contract in place with the client? To which they said, yeah. I was like, is it on your terms or the client's terms? The answer was, it's on the client's terms. I asked them, okay, what, to the best of your knowledge, does it say about IP? And he very confidently said, do you know what? I'm pretty sure we've said that we'll just give them the IP once they've paid their invoice. I was like, okay, now we have a challenge, because you are essentially giving your clients something that you don't have the rights to. And not only that, what you have done is you've taken this photographer's photographs and you've uploaded them into Midjourney. And the problem that I have with Midjourney is, whilst, the end user license agreement, depending on what license you're paying with Midjourney, will make you believe that you're going to own the creative output, actually the amount of times I've seen watermarked images in the creative output when I've been using Midjourney is quite astonishing. So there's definitely an IP issue there. And I said, nevertheless, you've used another person's imagery without permission to put it into AI to start making modifications to that image. And that, obviously, they have a legal right to prevent that kind of behaviour. So the awkward moment you're going to have is when you try and get the rights assigned to your photographer, assigned from your photographer to you as an agency, so then your agreement stands with your client. It's littered with challenges here, and you could just see their eyes opening up on the call thinking, oh my goodness me, yeah, this really is a can of worms. And the reason why I give you that example and that line of questioning is because that's just how easy it is to get into legal trouble. And actually, it's very easy to avoid legal trouble by just being very clear when it comes, if you're using contractors, have a contract in place that deals with IP. If you're using AI for generative images, be careful what you put in and make sure what you're putting into it, you have the full permission to put into that AI system. And then be careful with the outputs, because unfortunately you cannot rely on the outputs for what I described there with watermarking and traces of other people's IP that they may not have permission to use coming into outputs. So again, that's where your client contract needs to be really clear as well with those risks. So I'm hoping that that example in itself is going to be quite useful for your audience.
Very good example, and what it's kind of bringing up for me is going back to basics, because regardless of AI or not, the situation you described was, and probably this is getting a lot more prevalent in the agency space as people become more fractional, and people like agencies are using freelancers a lot more. That is the fundamental things, without complicating with AI. Have a contract with your freelancer. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's the bottom line for sure. And obviously, Kay, I don't know whether there's anything you would add to that piece.
Yeah, I mean, on the subject of having the contract with freelancers, I know this is slightly shifting away from the purpose of this chat, which is to talk about AI, but it is related because I've had conversations with people who they are, I sort of say, well, how many people are in your organisation? About 20, but only 3 of us are employed and everyone else is a freelancer. It's like, right. What do your agreements say? Because you're going to have to update your agreements if your freelancers are using AI. And are you controlling the AI that they're using? Are they using AI you've provided? Or are they freelancers who, work for multiple people and they have their own AI that they use? Do you know what licenses they're using? Do you know what rights they've got? And then it comes back to, okay, I've actually gone too deep into this questioning because I could see the glazed over look on the person's face as I'm speaking to them. And so we backtrack and said, have you got a contractor agreement in place in the first place to put these AI clauses into? And then you get people saying, well, actually, I've had multiple conversations with people who said, well, no, because my freelancer and I, we've known each other for many years and we've got a trusted relationship. And unfortunately, that trusted relationship, good as it is, it doesn't cut it in the business world. I mean, until a year ago, I was a freelancer working for Ryan. But I still had a contract with Hybrid Legal as a freelancer. I'd like to think Ryan trusted me, having known me for close to a decade, but he still had to have a contract with me. And, it's just good standard business practice.
Yes. Because I'm conscious of time, we've covered so much ground already, but I've got so many more questions to ask. But for those listening, I would love them to come away with a bit of a checklist of actions that they should really make sure that they're doing. So, and one aspect that I've been hearing about is a lot of account managers, for example, using AI, but their own accounts. And the danger.
Oh, yes.
So that for me keeps coming up again and again. And I'm like, oh, but what about your AI policy? We don't have one, or we do have one, but it's not clear, or we haven't been trained, or there's all these gaps. So between you, can you try to think of like a list of things, starting hopefully with the most important, that urgently address this first, and then go on to make sure that you've got this in place? What would you say as the urgent, if we've got maybe someone, to your point, Kay, about they're in between the really cautious and the really pro AI, they're in the middle, and they've got a mid-sized team, maybe 10 people, maybe, let's start there. What should they be thinking about?
The first thing is to
Yeah.
have a conversation. And there are ways to do it. You don't want to come across as, tell us we'll lose your job, because that's not the purpose. It's to have a very frank, open conversation with your team and just say, who's using AI? Please let me know what AI you're using. Please let me know what your license is. Start really basic with an internal due diligence exercise of just putting the question out there and asking people to tell you.
I think it's like an amnesty. I would say, yeah. I agree, Kay, and I would say, look, nobody's going to lose their jobs, but we do want you to be really, really honest, because we need to really understand what you're using. Because I think the worry is when you've got employees using free of charge licenses or their own licenses that they're plugging into email, or they're plugging into company databases where there'll be prolific access to personal data. And that's really problematic, not only from a cybersecurity perspective, but also from a data protection perspective. And it's better the devil you know, because at the end of the day, if you've not trained your employees on do's and don'ts, etc., and reality is, if you're a small business, as you were describing there, Jenny, with that typical size range, there's a high probability that you probably haven't had a chance to sit down with your team, as Kay has described, to have that conversation. So you want to encourage them to come forwards and burp everything up, because it's going to make your job a lot easier when it comes to working out what systems you're going to keep and what systems you are going to get rid of immediately.
Love that. Burp everything up. Is that because
Yeah.
you're going through, you got a baby stage in your I
Yeah.
love that. Okay, have the conversation with your team, also freelancers, get it all out in the open so that you can understand what everyone's doing. What would be the next kind of most important action that an agency owner should take?
So I think it's then looking at the what, the why, the where, the when, who, and the how. That classic checklist when you're questioning each third-party AI system, going through those questions and understanding what do you really need, and why is it, and when, and who will use it, and where will it be used. And I think that's really going to help build a clearer picture of AI in the business and what's going to be essential. And I think once you've arrived at that stage, you can then start risk assessing. So you can then start looking at, okay, how easy is it to find the end user license agreements for all of these systems? How easy is it to find the privacy policies on these systems? That in itself, I'll be amazed, because there's over 40,000 third-party AI systems available now, and that just keeps growing. I will be amazed if there are some on that list that actually have adequate information. So that in itself is a get rid of it immediately. If the company is not good enough to have these types of policies easy to find and well addressed on their website or within their apps, you've got to be questioning, well, what are they going to be like in the background with their data, with their IP, and how the company is generally structured. So you want to be really working with providers that prioritize those kind of documents and policies.
Just out of interest, you mentioned earlier on good and bad, like note takers. Are you starting to see kind of the worst offenders are X, Y, and Z, and the ones that kind of generally conform, a little bit more transparent? Could you share those with us?
Yeah, Kay, I would love a view from you on this. My two pence worth here is what I've seen. My example of a bad note taker would be these all-consuming note takers, where I've seen businesses plug in a note taker which will, you can prop it up in a meeting, a face-to-face meeting, and it just swallows up the entire room's conversation, takes that away, regurgitates it obviously into a conversation transcript. But when you interrogate what happens to that data in terms of where it goes, you then see that actually it's going to train the model. It's going to use the conversation transcripts to train the wider model. In order to improve our service and to make sure we deliver more accuracy, we need it to train the wider model. And that's why we're giving it to you free of charge, because it means that actually, you're going to be helping us build something amazing. And the problem with that is if you're not having confidential discussions, for example, if you're a student studying and you're taking it to seminars to talk about things, amazing, that's really low risk. But if you are speaking with another colleague about a confidential campaign, that's really problematic, especially if the agency signed up to an NDA or confidentiality provisions in a contract. You're already breaching that contract if you're using a form of note-taking system that is going to share it for training the wider large language model. But Kay, I'm sure you've got a view on some naughty note-takers as well.
Yeah, I've actually got a couple of stories here. So one of them is note takers where, to your point about how easy is it to find their T's and C's, how easy is it to work that note taker and be able to remove it from a meeting. If you have a note taker where you go into their dashboard and it's got lovely, easy to use little toggles where you can just click here, and disinvite, or have it to set to it doesn't automatically join your meetings. It will only join meetings that you invite it to. That's great. If you have a note taker, an AI note taker that has all those settings and it's very easy to use with minimal training, it's just there on a dashboard, that is a good note taker. A note taker where you have to go through intense training, you probably need to call up IT and have an IT expert sat by your side to actually find that menu in the first place for you. That is not a good note taker. Similarly, I have seen, and again, I'm being very careful not to name names here, I have seen note takers which have tried to be helpful and have this function where it will automatically email participants or call attendees to warn them of the fact that an AI note taker will be on there. Now, in theory, that is really good practice, and in fact, that's something which I advocate for all the time. As I tell people, and I think Jenny, you and I had this conversation. In fact, if you're using an AI note taker, put it in, each time you do a meeting. I do it as a part of my meeting invitations. Actually, I have a signature that tells people that I'm using an AI note taker and the purpose for it, and it gives people the opportunity to say, actually, no, Kay, I want you to switch it off, I'm not comfortable, and I just have to go back to old-fashioned pen and paper, which is fine by me. But so where you've got an AI note taker that offers this amazing facility where it will send out an email to those people in advance for you to save you from having to do your own setting, it sounds good in theory, but then you've got to unpick it. In order for that AI note taker to be able to email your participants to tell them that an AI note taker will be present, they would have actually already had to have been invited to the meeting. They would already have the email address of your participants to be able to send that email out there in the first place. So if you have someone who is very protective of their personal data, did not want an AI to have access to it in the first place, you've effectively confessed by sending out that automated message to them, and that is a big no-no. So that's just, and it's a really easy mistake to make. That's just the one example, and the other example of a bad AI note taker, and this touches upon the point again that Ryan made about how AI note takers get trained sometimes. They shouldn't, but if it trains on what it's being made privy to and listened to, I have heard through someone else of what I would describe a horror story, where they said that they had no AI note taker who had attended previous meetings, and luckily they were internal ones, but then one internal meeting didn't happen, and based on predictions made of previous meetings, that AI note taker created a transcript of of a meeting that never happened
Wow.
because it had been invited, and it used the predictions. I mean, it was minimal risk. It was internal. Everybody in that meeting knew that it was basically an hallucination.
Can you imagine if it had been a client meeting that had got cancelled and then the transcript gets sent out automatically? Because that's a setting, isn't it? How
Yeah.
weird would that be?
Well, it creates HR issues as well, Jenny, because I wonder how many times across the world someone's sent in an AI note taker but hasn't turned up to the meeting because they're ill or can't make it or whatever, and their colleagues have continued the meeting and have then started talking about things that are being recorded, but they've forgotten that it's being recorded, and then that colleague gets sent the transcript, reviews it, and thinks, hang on a minute, they're having a right old whinge about me or this person or whatever. And yeah, so it's got its upsides, but it's definitely got its downsides as well. And I think this is the training piece, it's the education piece. On that checklist, I think you've definitely got to be doing AI awareness training with your teams.
I think the etiquette also, I think it throws up the etiquette of your note taker attending without asking permission in advance. You know, it's like I used this analogy the other day, like in the old days, if you have an in-person agency or meeting with your client, for example, it's like someone coming in, putting a tape recorder in the middle of the room, pressing record without asking anyone's permission. You know, that is essentially what you're doing. I've done it myself. In the early days, I actually did it inadvertently, but then realized that it's a conversation perhaps we should be having. Anyway, going back to this is gold, by the way. Thank you both so much for sharing. I'm conscious of time, but I just want to go back to our little checklist so people can come away with some actions. So point one was have a conversation internally about how everyone's using AI tools. Be honest. Then look at the systems actually in more detail. Each AI system, what how are they used, how are they being used, and what are the guardrails. And then that risk assessment, you know, look at how easy it is to access their policies. What else is there? Anything else? Because that's a lot to be getting along with.
Yeah, so I think once you've gone through those key points, I think the next piece is designing your internal policy where you're agreeing with your team what AI you are going to use versus what AI you're not going to use, and making that collaborative. Because I think if you just dictate it from leadership level and push it down on the team without having that conversation and without actually hearing their views on how they believe the agency should be using AI, you're going to get either non-compliance or pushback or just general dissatisfaction, which is not where you want to be. So I think making it collaborative across the business, particularly if it's quite a small agency, I think is a no-brainer. And I think then you can design your internal policy. And I think you then need to be taking some advice from your HR expert or your employment lawyer around how can you make that policy have teeth in the event that you have an employee that has gone through training but has then rebelled against the training a period of time later and breached the policy. What teeth can you have now to deter that kind of behaviour? Because again, you want to make sure that a policy is actually going to be worth the paper it's written on. Because the reality is, not many people read an employment handbook these days. If we're really honest with ourselves, where the gold comes from is the team training days, the workshops, those conversations. So my view is you need to do that before you draft your internal policy. Your internal policy follows that big communication piece, that event that you have internally with your team to talk about AI, you know, and then you maintain it from there. And then it's much easier for you to create your external client AI policy, which is the next really key thing to do, making sure that you have a policy that not only the leadership team are confident with, but all of the team, if they're asked the question when they're pitching for work or when they're working with existing clients and the client says, just tell us how your agency is using AI, they've got the confidence to know that there's an AI policy there and they can have a conversation with that client about it. And if that policy covers the dread questions around IP, data, confidentiality, what about bias, what about discrimination, covering all of those pieces and being trained on it, I think will give that agency a bit of a leading edge against those that just don't bother with this stuff because they see it as boring compliance stuff. Actually, I think those agencies that take these kind of things seriously will do really well in the current market. But Kay, what would you add?
I think Ryan's actually highlighted all the key points there in the process. The only thing I would add is that I am aware of the fact that once you found out what AI your team are using and you start going through the T's and C's and examining it, and it is a process, and I'm not going to lie, it does take time. You may not even, you may not do it yourself. You may go to a third party to help you do that, and again, this all takes time. And during that critical time, you've got this like no man's land sort of area where do your staff continue using the AI? Because have you basically just given them permission because you are fully aware, or do you say no to using the AI, and for what period? Because it could, if it takes you weeks to get through 10 different sets of AI user terms, especially if some of that AI is not reliable AI and has very difficult to find terms, and then you've got conversations with lawyers and we're giving you our opinions and you're scratching your head over that, and you're trying to maintain your core business at the same time. So you have got that little period. So what I would suggest in that process is that in that interim period, you haven't yet rolled out your AI training. You haven't yet written your AI policy, because you need those answers before you can do that. But what you can do is you can set some high-level AI principles to flow down to your team. And this goes in that little in-between period of you've spoken with your team, you found out what AI they're using. It's at that point you can say, right, let's set out our principles. From this point on, not targeting anyone here, not telling anyone off, but if you have been copying and pasting email trails direct into that AI, stop doing it. You can use AI to copy and paste maybe, sentences, but don't put in email addresses. Don't put in any confidential information. If in doubt, come and speak to me first, as in, you being the owner of the agency, come and speak to me, and we'll, just get a bit of a decision, get a bit of a conversation going. So, as I said, it's an interim fix whilst you work towards the training and the policy.
Very insightful, and thank you for sharing so much advice. That's so useful, Kay. And presumably the next step is then we've got the internal policy, we've got the external policy. And by the way, Kay and I have gone through this together. So Kay, thank you for all your guidance, because I feel very confident now. And then the next step is translating all that into your external contracts, right? Into all of your contracts. So
That's exactly right.
Anything that you want to say around that?
Yeah, Kay, what would you be looking for in client contracts when the agency's either negotiating a contract with a brand or issuing a contract to a brand? What are you putting in there to help with AI? Sorry, Jenny, I shouldn't be asking questions.
No, you do a better job than I do, Ryan. So carry on.
I mean, and the best approach is, if you are the agency, is think about what your client would probably ask you. What are they going to want to know? So transparency is key. So you want to have in your contract, as at the bare minimum, you want to put in your terms acknowledgement that you're using AI, how you're using AI, and also what you're not using AI for, because that's sometimes some reassurance for your clients that, we're not using it to put your confidential information in. We're not using your personal data and putting it into AI. Obviously those are ideals to put in your contract, and then you obviously want to make sure that you're actually sticking with that in real life. But yeah, they're the main things to put into your contracts. It sounds really simple when you put it like this. Obviously, it gets a bit deeper once you start examining AI uses. But yeah, what AI you're using, how you're using it, why you're using it. It goes back to those what, how, why, when, all those basic questions. that's what needs to go into your contracts.
Amazing. So I think this is probably a good time to kind of wrap it up. And for those listening that maybe you've picked on a few topics that people don't feel completely comfortable with, because let's face it, it's such a fast evolving situation that everyone's trying to keep up. Who do you work with? How can people talk to you? What's the best way if someone's just got a query or they've actually got, I need a policy, I need a contract. Just talk us through the best ways of getting in contact and what you can do for them.
Yeah, no worries. We'll be delighted to help anyone that's listening. One of our key specialisms is the agency space. We've been working with UK independent creative agencies for many years now. So we understand their world, and we understand that AI is obviously a major disruptor. There are some that are really embracing it, others not so much, but we're here to help them regardless of what side you sit on, and that if they're looking to stay in touch with updates on AI and tips and free of charge tips and guidance, etc., the best bet would be to sign up to Legal Loop, which you can find on the Hybrid Legal website, and that's where I send out a bi-weekly newsletter. It's not a sales pitch, we're just sharing free of charge legal insights into what we're seeing in the market from a legal perspective. Sign up to that, and that will keep you up to date, because obviously if there's any legislation updates, we'll push it out via that. But also to follow Kay, to follow me on LinkedIn, connect with us. You can message us on LinkedIn, or you can message us through the website if you have any queries. We're both active on LinkedIn, so please do interact with us on there. And what I would also say is if there are any listeners that aren't in the agency space, we can help you as well. We work with lots of other businesses outside of the agency industry as well, even though agencies obviously always has our heart. We do work with a number of different businesses as well, so that gives us different perspectives on different AI use cases as well, which is good for our own knowledge and training. So I hope that clarifies. We are, by the way, one final thing, sorry Jenny, just to add, is we do run webinars now on this subject. They're going on most weeks, free of charge AI webinars where you can join. It's half an hour, and we'll be talking to you in more detail about legal risks, what to do, what to avoid, and I would say that's a really good starting point as well, which you can find on our LinkedIn, Hybrid Legal's LinkedIn page, as well as me and our website.
Ryan, thank you so much. We'll make sure we put all the contact details in the show notes for you. And just from both of your perspective, just one piece of final advice for either an agency owner or an account manager listening to this right now.
Great question. Okay.
One. It's hard to find just one.
I know.
I've got one.
Okay, I could do it in one word: transparency. Be transparent.
And for me, it might sound like a boring one, but just read what you're signing up to. We're so desensitized to tick here to confirm you have read and accepted the end user license agreement. For me, it's devil is in the detail. Read what you're agreeing to.
Kay, Ryan, thank you so much. This has been absolutely exceptional. So thank you so much for your time.
Our pleasure. Jenny, thank you so much for having us and having me back as well. Very brave, but thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.